This is Mainstreet with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Mainstreet. Gary Allen with you. I hope you've had a wonderful week since the last time we met. Of course, every Tuesday afternoon, we will meet here. Next week, I have Will Schreiner coming on. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then at the end of the show, I have a particular thing that I would like to do. First of all, I want to thank my executive producer, Rick Del Vecchio, for helping me put all this together. The Michael and Grant Miller allowing me to have the platform here on the C News Network. My studio producer today is Julian. I also want to thank our community sponsors, the Japanese Gardens of Miami, also the Elks Lodges of South Florida. We're going to be doing maybe something really good with them in the upcoming shows. The guest that I have on today is a gentleman who I've wanted to have on for some time. We had a glitch the last time we were trying to have Joe on. Joe is a remarkable man. He really is. And he's becoming a friend slowly but surely over a period of time. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's an attorney. He's a sports broadcaster for the Fox network as well as Westwood One. He is a consultant. He was an agent, a sports rep, where he used to rep many agents through his company called he was a founder of Sports Mania. He is also a public speaker, and as well as anything else, he is a consultant. And he is a really great guy, and he's the father of one of the biggest stars in all of South Florida, Mr. Tasso, who is off today, enjoying a sabbatical with some of his friends as they romp around the playground and enjoy themselves. So would you please welcome, and I'm pleased to have him on this particular program here on Mainstreet, would you please welcome Mr. Joe Casale. Joe, welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Nice to be with you.
And it's nice to have you on as well. Joe, today you're celebrating an anniversary of which somehow my birthday plays part of that.
Yeah, it was, it'll be October 25th. It will be the 10-year anniversary that I was run over by a tractor-trailer truck in London when I was there to work the Patriots-Rams game. I was on my way to Harrods to get a Wimbledon towel, and a tractor-trailer truck ran a red light and crushed my legs. And wow. The anniversary today is that 9 years ago today, I got the feeling back in my left foot, which was the last remaining appendage that I get the feeling back in to be able to function. So yeah, it was pretty wild. And but it took almost a year. It was 11 and a half months total from the day of the accident to when I could walk without assistance. So I kind of beat the doctor's odds and only gave me a 25 to 30% chance. So
yeah. Did that hamper your business at that particular time?
More than you know. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff with family. You thought you can depend on business partners. You know, when you're not a breadwinner any longer, you know, people view you a little bit differently. And that, you know, you get life lessons that go beyond physical therapy. And, but you can do a whole other show on that. So, but fortunately, everything is A-okay, and still as stubborn as ever, still walking without a limp, and you know, everything else is in good working order.
My uncle, who was in the entertainment business, Mr. Tubby Boots, who was on Miami Beach forever and a day, always said, "You find out who your friends are when times are tough for yourself. You know, the ones that'll stick with you."
There's a lot of truth to that.
You know, because money turns to be an object, and you might have to borrow from this one and that one, and you might have to borrow numerous times or whatever. But yeah, you find out who your friends are right away. By the way, I also want to inject, Joe is a foodie. If you're on Facebook and you catch him at all, he's always cooking something. It always looks more delicious than what I'm having. So I'm moving down to Joe's very soon to move in with him and Tasso and annoy the neighbors even more,
we always like that. The more we can annoy them, the better we can do.
Is that situation still going on? For those of you who don't know, there's a couple of neighbors who don't like the fact that Tasso barks.
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing, but you know, it's kind of like an outbreak of syphilis. There are outbreaks, and then it's under control. So today we're in an under control mode, but there could be an outbreak at any time. But you know, the way I look at it is, I mean, I've been in a condominium for 32 years. The only time I've ever had neighbors that have been not so great. So I've beaten the odds. So, you were kind of due to get one of those Seinfeld-like South Florida neighbor stories. And, I have them now, but I beat the odds for a long time. So I'm still ahead of the game.
How are they taking to the other neighbors that just recently moved in who have 2 dogs as well that I'm sure bark?
Well, they complained on them the second day they were here, and then those people went back to Massachusetts for the summer. So they're not going to be back here until November or December. So that's a TBT. We'll see how that works out.
I have a kitty cat. I have a little princess, and of course I had her brother for 15 years. I adopted him in Las Vegas, and I brought him here. There's nothing more wonderful than when I come in the afternoon from what I'm doing, and they're there. Now in this case, Tasso goes everywhere with you, and he's a celebrity. I mean, you have created
Doug
his
has
own.
a bigger social life than I do. I mean, I'm going out tonight to the opening of the Best of Delray Beach app. They're doing an opening party in downtown Delray. When I got the invitation from a friend of mine, no less, he said,
And it said
Tasso
Tasso
can come. Making it pretty clear, my job is to be the designated driver for the pooch.
And you know something, after everything that he's been through, this is wonderful for him.
Yeah, I mean, his history, he was caught in the Lake Charles. He was abandoned by his original owners in the Lake Charles hurricane in August of 2020. He was put in a shelter. The shelter weathered that whole Category 4 storm, and the power went out. And then there's a rescue organization in New Orleans called Zeus's Rescues. They drove 3.5 hours to take 31 dogs and 3 cats from Lake Charles to New Orleans after the Sunday after the storm. And a friend of mine messaged me with a video that was on Facebook of Zeus unloading the dogs from the van, and she said, "I just found you your dog," and it was his name at that time was Joshua, and he was coming out of the carrier case. And of course, I've been looking for a while, but it's always hemming and hawing because with the travel I do and everything, you say, can you take care of them? I haven't had a dog in 20 years and all of that. And so I said, well, I don't know. Let me think about it. And she said, well, I'm going to Zeus's tomorrow and I'm going to get the dog and you're going to have to get your butt here and pick him up. So she went the next day and he was gone. And said somebody already adopted him. So I said, okay, it just was, wasn't meant to be, no big deal. And on Saturday, I got a text from her and it was Tasso in the cage area pulling out a cat litter tray from one of the cat trails in the rescue place. And I said, I thought he was adopted. Said the people returned him in a day. She said, I'm taking him home and you're going to have to come here and pick him up. And I went and got him. And, that was September. That was just after Labor Day of September 2020.
Right.
He then was diagnosed with heartworm, as most dogs in Louisiana, unfortunately, get. That was a 7 to 8 month treatment program he was on. So he's been through hell and back. And now he's 2.5 years old. He's full of energy. He runs Joe Casale. He's a celebrity in Delray Beach. I mean, I was at a bagel place the other day, and a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, that's the dog I see on Instagram all the time." So, so it's pretty wild. But he's a good little dog, and he's adjusted really well, and he's friendly, and basically everybody but 2 people love him. So he's got it going for him.
Yeah, and those 2 people are out of their minds, because if you can't love an animal, you can't even love yourself. I'm sorry. It's just, I mean, when I was a little boy living in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, unfortunately, my aunt and uncle died 24 hours of each other. We had a dog named Sandy, and I don't know what happened to Sandy. I had to leave and come home with my mother, and that has hurt me ever since. Now everybody keeps telling me, Gary, it's not your fault. You're a little boy. What were you going to do with the dog? Now hopefully my Uncle Tudor took him, but we never were in touch with my uncle. But anyway, I wanted to get that out of the way because I love that little pooch so much, and I'm so hopeful that I'm going to get to see him before too long, or if you come up to Palm Bay, which is this thriving metropolis upon which I live. Oh, God, of all the places I wanted to live. Joe, you have been around the sports world as I have been around the sports world for many, many, many years. And I want to talk a little bit about this Drew Brees situation that a month ago, when you were going to be coming on, was where it kind of hit, where he was talking about maybe coming back and playing football. Now, you are a major New Orleans Saints fan. Anybody that knows you love the Saints, you love New Orleans, and that's fantastic. It's a beautiful city. Although they should have built it further north so it wouldn't be underwater all the time, but nevertheless, you also stated that you thought he should have gone somewhere else doing college games. Now, my good friend Brian Baldinger from the NFL Network, he went over to Europe and did the NFL Europe games to cut his teeth. Do you think he's really going to come back as a quarterback, or is he going to have to learn the game of being a commentator or a play-by-play person somewhere else before they give him another opportunity?
Yeah, I don't think he'll ever play football again. I think that was more of a passing line of what he was saying. And I think what happened to Drew is what happens to a lot of players that get into this business. I mean, there's not a lot of direction. They throw you into the deep end of the pool and they expect you to be Michael Phelps. And if you're thrown in the deep end of the pool and you're not Michael Phelps, then you have issues. I think in Drew's case, what happened with him is he went from being on the field as a quarterback, a core guy, the noise, the crowd, the energy of game day, and you put him in the studio where there's no game day. You're sitting in a studio looking at a green screen.
Yep.
And I think that was a really difficult adjustment for him. And then they decided, well, we're going to just put him in the booth. Well, but he didn't have any game reps. And I think Drew could have survived that if not for the playoff game. He had the playoff game in Cincinnati. It was an abomination. They messed up a rule. They didn't explain the rules properly. I mean, it was like the worst experience an analyst could have. And at that point, you just knew it wasn't going to work out. I mean, obviously, when he was hired, the idea was they were grooming him to replace Chris Collinsworth on Sunday Night Football. And you think about this for a minute. Sunday Night Football is the number one show in television. It's not the number one sports show in television. It's the number one show on television. And it has been for over 10 years. And you're taking somebody who's never done this before, and you're going to replace him with a core guy replacing a core guy. You could, whether you like Chris Collinsworth or not, the reality of it is he and Al Michaels were broadcasting the number one show in television. Yep. It would be, to date ourselves, but it would be like hiring an actor off the street to replace Carol O'Connor as Archie Bunker.
Ain't gonna happen.
And you turn around and go, well, but that guy sucks. Yeah, I mean, it just wouldn't have worked. It wasn't going to work. Like if I was running NBC Sports, what I would have done, because I do think Drew has potential, I would have done it the way CBS did with John Madden. And we all forget John Madden didn't start out with Pat Summerall. John Madden was working his fifth and sixth teams for like 3 years with different guys. Started with Gary Bender. I mean, so you get them through the ropes of understanding television and when to go to break and how quick you got to get in and get out and all of the mechanics of being an analyst. Then you move them up the food chain. What they did was they threw him in the deep end of the pool. He drowned. And then they went, well, now what do we do? And I think, fortunately for all parties, they reached a meeting of the minds. And now if Drew wants to get back in this business, he's going to have to start. I don't want to say start at the bottom, because he's Drew Brees. They never start at the bottom. Yeah. But he's not going to be a 1 or 2 team guy on an NFL broadcast. He could go maybe do Big Ten games for the Big Ten Network and be their number one analyst or something, but he has to really put the reps in and put the time in to do it. And now people may contrast that with, well, look what Fox gave Tom Brady. They gave Tom Brady, that's a brand ambassador job. He's not just going to be doing football. You're going to see Tom Brady on every piece of Fox programming because you don't pay somebody $375 million to broadcast football games. You pay him to be a brand ambassador. And Drew wasn't that guy. He was not going to be a brand ambassador. So I think in Drew's case, and it's happened to a lot of guys in this business, you can get kicked in the teeth and you can recover and be very, very good at it. But it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of games. I have a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, who after 25 plus years got into broadcasting, doing play-by-play for hockey games. And, I was kind of prepping him, and I got him the field view binoculars to work off of and all the different mechanics of it. And I said, let me tell you right now, you're going to need 50 games before you feel comfortable doing it. You're going to think I'm nuts, but I'm telling you, if you can last 50 games, which is basically 2 college hockey seasons, you're going to be fine, because you'll see your improvement from game 1 and 2 to game 49 to 50, because it's reps. And you can't replicate that in the studio. You can't replicate that at home working off, doing games. You have to just do it. And sure enough, he texted me and he says, my 50th game. And I feel like I really know what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Because that's what it takes. This is a hard business. It's just like very few people just come out of college and light up the NFL as a quarterback. It's the same thing. It's just, and I think for guys who have had massive success, it's hard. It's an ego kick. It's like, how can I fail at this? But, he has potential. Now, whether a network is going to be patient enough, and he's going to be patient enough to do the things necessary to get back to a higher level, that remains to be seen. But not everybody's cut out for this.
No, they're not.
No, as you know, and you find that out real quickly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I interned for Larry King at WIOD when I was at the University of Miami. I learned from him. I learned from others. I watch. I observe. I kind of got my own little niche because we borrow from here, we borrow from there, and then you kind of put it together to who you are. But you're right. You have to have the reps. It's like when I was a young actor in LA, even though I was doing Hill Street and St. Elsewhere, thanks to Stephen Boschko, God rest your soul. Ray Abruzzo and I both have Stephen Boschko stories that we joke about all the time. There's another Goomba for you. There's another guy that I should have on. Ray and I are like, I'll do this fabulous introduction for him. And Ray Abruzzo, blah, blah, blah. And here's my good friend, Ray Abruzzo. He'll come on the camera. He'll go, who am I doing this show with? Who am I doing this show with? And he constantly busts me all the time. But yeah, how to be an actor? You got to go and act. How do you be a talk show host? You got to go and do it. You just got to do. Now, I am fortunate. I'm not the greatest that will ever be, but I have a decent personality. I've traveled the world. I have a lot to talk about, and I enjoy having a conversation with people. By the way, Tony Romo he was criticized at the very beginning when he came into the booth, and I don't know where he cut his teeth, if he did anywhere, but he has slowly but surely gotten better. There's sometimes I wish he'd shut up, but other than that, he does a good
became
job.
A phenomenon, but it's like I always tell people, there are outliers everywhere. I mean, you can get a guy that, comes out of nowhere and becomes rookie of the year and a superstar player. But that's not the norm, and Romo, Romo's whole shtick was being able to predict plays and his enthusiasm and energy and all of that stuff. And, listen, he parlayed it to a phenomenal career, but that's not, if you look at Breeze is not Romo personality wise. Breeze is an analytical kind of guy. You all have to be yourself on the air. What you have to be is you. You can't be somebody else.
No.
And I think that in Drew's case, he could be good, but it's, when you're going to be that guy, the deep thinker, the analysis guy, the non-comedian, man, you got to be on top of your game all the time. You can't make mistakes. You can't laugh them off. See, Romo, who did a horrible job in the postseason last year, nobody cares because it's enthusiasm and it's fun and people don't take him seriously. I think in Breeze's case, they were looking at somebody they were going to take seriously. It's going to be interesting to see what Tom Brady we get in the broadcast booth when he's done. Do we get the Tom Brady from New England or do we get the Tom Brady from Tampa Bay? Tom Brady with Tampa Bay is not only mixing in analysis, but he's mixing in humor and likability. The Tom Brady in New England was a robot, and it's going to be interesting to see, when he's on the air, how that translates, because everybody's a certain way and then the light goes on. And then, some people rise to that occasion and some people go, it's the light. We're on the air.
Yeah. Well, it's like my guest next week. And then my very dear friend, Chris DePetta, who owns the Punchline in Atlanta. And he's Billy Gardell's manager. A lot of people, I did stand up and I did it to overcome some things. But yeah, once that light is on you and you go, huh? And the people are sitting in the audience and they go, make me laugh.
Right.
And it's a whole other ballgame.
That's right.
You either got it or you don't. And luckily I managed to get through that when I lived in Las Vegas. Joe, you and I love the University of Miami. I went there. What's happening down there? Is Mario going to turn us around? Hopefully, with the transfer portal and the NIL.
And I think NIL has probably had as big an impact on the University of Miami as any school in the country, because John Ruiz, one of their bigger boosters, was very aggressive with the NIL programs there and is attracting student athletes. And listen, college sports is a whole new ballgame now. And, these kids are getting paid and they're going to continue to get paid. And it is going to change the landscape of the sport. And in a place like Miami, where you have somebody that has a ton of money and loves the school and is doing it by the book, no matter what the NCAA thinks, and he is at the forefront of it. And with Mario, who is an aggressive recruiter, an alum, he has surrounded himself with really good people. The university has poured the kind of money into the program you have to do today if you want to compete at a high level with regard to assistant coaches' salaries,
right,
and head coach salaries, all of that. I mean, Miami is now in the big leagues in terms of finances to compete. And so they have, it seems that things are being, all aligned to show that they're going to make a comeback. Obviously, play on the field determines that, but it's like anything else. You got to have the horses. And when you have the people in place to get the horses and the NIL is allowing you to get the horses, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And I think for Miami, it's, let's just say if it was a stock, you buy it because you feel like it's on the upswing.
Yeah. Joe Casale is our guest here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you as I am every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Joe is becoming a good friend of mine. Unfortunately, the star of the household at Casa del Sol is not with us today. He's out being a playboy, and that's Mr. Tasso, who will be performing later on tonight for his audience when he goes out to a big event. Does he wear a bow tie at all at any of these events?
Oh, man. You just got to keep a pocket full of treats. And, the thing funny about the dog is he loves to ride in a car. So he loves it. I mean, he doesn't like it. He loves it. Yeah. So he's always looking to go out. I mean, so he's very social. And he's good with people. So you don't have to worry about him nipping people. And he's good with other dogs. He just likes being out. You could tell the dog is a New Orleans dog because he likes to be out and he loves to eat. So he's gold. You could tell where he came from. He came from New Orleans, and he's got a big personality and a big appetite. And there you go.
It's like his dad. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that you don't put something on Facebook. And folks, you gotta friend Joe Casale. You really do on Facebook. The recipes alone, I'm telling you, many times I wanted to write, Joe, do you want to adopt a 69-year-old man? Because you eat better than I do. Of course, I'm single, and I do that. We were talking about the NIL and the transfer portal. Dave Lamont wrote something. He asked you a question on Facebook, and Dave is a good friend to both you and I. Can you, at the same time, love it and hate it?
Well, I think so. Listen, I think when there's this kind of cataclysmic change, I mean, we are used to college athletics being a certain way. And now all of a sudden it's, I can analogize it to the agent business, and I'll do that in a minute. But all of a sudden it's, hey, I'm a high school senior quarterback. I'm at the Elite 7 camp, and you're recruiting me, Jimbo Fisher. You're recruiting me, Nick Saban. You're recruiting me, Mario Cristobal. My price tag's $1.5 million. Where's my, you got to get me $1.5 million in NIL money. You do that, you're going to get a visit. You don't do that, you don't. And these guys aren't used to that. These guys are used to having the negotiation on the other side of it. Here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to bring you in here. You're going to compete for a job, Yeah. And that now it's the kids who are saying 1.5 or I don't visit.
Yeah, Nick Saban.
Is it easy? Is it easy to hate that too? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, hey man, this is really has a little ickiness to it, but it's what the landscape is now, and it's not going back. It's like the NCAA had a chance to really create rules around this,
and they didn't.
Instead of doing it, they kept fighting it. They kept fighting the inevitable. It's kind of like they're a Palm Pilot in an iPhone world, and they kept fighting to keep the Palm Pilot, even though everybody wanted an iPhone, and eventually we're going to get an iPhone. So you got your Palm Pilot, NCAA, but everybody's got an iPhone. So now the NCAA is trying to beef up their enforcement division, and they're going to try to set an example out of somebody. That's not going to work. That's gone. What they should have done is create a set of universal rules that everyone can follow. Instead, they left it to the states. So every state has different NIL rules, which, if you remember the dust-up that Nick Saban had with Jimbo Fisher a few weeks ago, Nick Saban wasn't pissed at Jimbo Fisher. Nick Saban was pissed at an Alabama legislature who's allowing Alabama to fall behind in the NIL world. And Nick's message was, hey, guys, Texas A&M bought a whole class. We got to step up our game.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the hidden message in all of that. Everybody got caught up in what they thought was the real squabble, but the real squabble was the message Saban was sending to state legislators in Alabama that we've got to change the way we do business here, because even though I'm Nick Saban and I've got 7 national championships or 8 national championships, and I'm the greatest coach in history, I ain't getting the 5-star quarterback unless I give him $2 million.
Yeah.
And this isn't SEC old days under the table $2 million. This is $2 million, and he's driving around in a Lamborghini, or I'm screwed. And so that's kind of where it's at. And it is, and it's going to be a bumpy road for people who really love college athletics at a certain level and see where it's going, because it's crazy now. It's going to get crazier, because I got wind of something, and I can't repeat it from the coach I heard it from.
Okay.
But he texted me a list of position by position in college football of how much you got to come up with NIL money to get players at a certain position. Like, you want a left tackle, it's X. You want to run it back, it's Y. I mean, and it was like, holy crap, how are you going to do this?
Yeah.
And, my answer to that is, well, maybe the coach can't make $9 million. Maybe he can only make 6.5, and he's going to have to live with it if he wants players.
Right.
If you don't want players, then you take the $9 million and you do what you got to do. Now, for fans who say, hey, that's terrible, blah, blah, blah. Hey, look, that's the world now. Players have to make this decision all the time in salary cap leagues professionally. Hey, do I take the big money? Do I take $30 million a year, Or do I take $18 million a year and give my team a chance to fill the roster out? I mean, so what's happening now is college coaches who are used to being kings and masters of their universe now are no longer kings and masters of their universe if they don't make adjustments. And they're not used to that. They're used to having a hammer. When I first started out as an agent, I had lunch with Marvin Miller, the late head of the MLB Players Association.
Yeah.
And Marvin said two things to me that always stuck with me. He said, negotiations, you're either the hammer or the nail. If you're the nail, you never get anywhere. You got to be the hammer, and you got to be the hammer all the time. And the next thing he said to me is, you never join the same country club as the people you negotiate against. I don't care who it is. You keep your distance. You don't. If you remember Ghostbusters, you don't cross the streams. Now obviously, 35, 40 years later, a lot of that has changed, and frankly, not for the better. But that's kind of where you are now. Coaches are used to having the hammer.
Oh, yeah.
Fans don't even know that these scholarships are guaranteed only year to year. They're not 4-year rides. I always hear people on talk radio say, oh, these kids, they get their education paid for 4 years. No, they don't. It's renewable on a year-to-year basis. And there are plenty of times the Nick Sabans of the world have sat down with a student athlete after his first year and said, it's not going to work out for you here. I hope you transfer, but I'm not going to renew your scholarship. And it's not because the kid isn't a good student. It's because the kid wasn't a football player that they wanted, or they want to get somebody better. Now it's all changed. NIL has changed that landscape. It's that you've got this 5-star quarterback who hasn't played it down yet, but has $825,000 in NIL money. You're going to have to keep him.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to develop him. And these guys are not used to that kind of sudden change. I'll give you an example. It was years ago when I was starting out as an agent. You go to coaches' conventions and you would look to make contacts, and they would always be in the hallways, and they'd always be talking football and talking X's and O's and talking about next jobs, and you'd make your contacts and you'd introduce yourself to the hotshot offensive coordinator who may be a head coach one day, and that's a guy who you may be going to that school to recruit players and all this stuff. Now you go to coaches' conventions, fewer of them are in the lobby, and they're all talking about their angel and venture capital investments, their second and third homes, whether the NetJets program is working for them for their private jet service. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Now, NIL, it's changing because these guys now have to share the pie, and they're not used to sharing the pie. And I've said this since this really has hit.
Mm-hmm.
The coaches that realize sharing the pie works will be the guys that are successful. And the ones that don't will retire with 50 to 60 million in the bank and live a wonderful life. But their days at the top of the food chain are over.
Do you think that, and I'm hoping this kid is as good as he was last year, Tyler Van Dyke is going to keep us moving forward?
He's a legit player. I mean, he's a kid that if he continues to develop, he's one of those top 10 first-round draft choices, quarterbacks that you want in the NFL. There's no question about that.
Yeah. Do you remember the story? You're talking about agents and how things have changed. When my brother was drafted by the Colts in '65, he was their first-round draft pick. I think he signed for $35,000. That was the whole bit, the whole Megillah. But do you remember the story about Vince Lombardi? He was sitting down and he was going to talk to an offensive lineman. Back then, folks, they didn't have agents. Players didn't have agents. Players negotiated their own contracts. The teams set the rules. How much? So many years. Did you do this? Did you do that? Blah, 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 blah. Vince Lombardi was sitting down to negotiate with an offensive lineman. I forget who it was. He comes in and he has another guy with him. And Vince says, how are you? Who are you? He says, I'm so-and-so's agent. He said, really? He said, hang on a minute. He comes back about 10 minutes later and he says, okay, Mr. Coach, let's talk about this gentleman's contract. He said, you're going to have to go to the Philadelphia Eagles to do that. I just traded him.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the kind of power they had back then.
Hey, when I was starting out as an agent representing broadcasters, ESPN had a no agent edict. You couldn't have an
Really?
agent. And this was 1985. You couldn't have an agent. They were 6 years old. They were just starting to really give out contracts. One of the
Yeah.
things, you couldn't have an agent. That's changed now, but
Yeah.
it's the business has evolved. The industry has evolved. I mean, sports went from being this thing that we did to a monolith. I mean, the NFL's a $12 billion a year business and getting bigger. I mean, the NFL is going to be a $20 billion business by 2028, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
And with that comes enormous power for everyone involved, not just owners and coaches. It's, players have more power now than they've ever had.
Yeah.
It's the evolution of the industry.
Yeah. And I mean, it's going to get more and more and more. I want to change course here just a little bit. I want to talk about Phil Nicholson. You also on Facebook. I follow you like crazy on Facebook. I'm an unabashed Joe
Yeah, it's my
Casale.
blog because I'm too lazy to start a blog, so I started a Facebook page.
I do
Always a
comment.
step behind the times.
I do comment from time to time, particularly if it's Tasso. I do comment. This LIV tournament. I mean, I guess they're calling it Live tournament,
Right.
that the Saudi Arabians have put together. I don't know how, in the name of God, the golfers who are justifying what they're doing by saying, well, it's making the game better. First of all, we're only going to be able to see it if you have Apple TV, if I'm correct, Joe. I'm correct.
I mean, the golfers don't need to say that because that's just nonsense. That's the talking points that Ari Fleischer, who does the PR for Live, gave them. And no one follows up with the next question of, how are you making the game better? They can't answer that because they're on. You'd have a lot more respect for these guys if you're Phil Mickelson and say, look, I'm 52 years old. I pissed away over $50 million gambling. They're throwing me $200 million. I'm taking the money. You may not like it. You may think, Jesus, man, you're getting in bed with the Saudis of all people. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But at least you're being honest. And there are points for honesty. The stuff that you're getting now from these guys is, hey, can't we just get all this money and you leave us alone? Unfortunately, the geopolitics of it make it impossible. I mean, these are people who saw journalists in half. I mean, look, if you don't have a problem with that,
Joe, 9/11.
Yeah, if you don't have a problem with that, then it is what it is. But I tell you, it's one of these things. I mean, look, golfers are among the most selfish of athletes anyway. The PGA Tour is certainly no saints in this. But look, the Saudis are never, this is unlike other sports leagues. The Saudis are never going to run out of money. They may run out of interest, but they're never going to run out of money. Okay, so it's going to be around. And these guys, I think some of these guys, even the younger, especially the younger guys, must be saying to themselves, look, I'll do this for 3 or 4 years. I'll make $100 million plus. If the PGA Tour welcomes me back, I'll come back and play. If they don't, I'll retire. And I have all this money. And you know what? That's fine. But, and here's the but, you're going to be hated by a large segment of this population. And if you don't have the stomach for that, then you shouldn't be doing it. There are some people that have the stomach for it and don't care. But a lot of these golfers, they'll tell you how tough they are. But if you write one bad story about them or you say one bad thing, their agent is on the phone 15 minutes after it's published and they won't talk to you. And I mean, they're really sensitive. And, I personally, listen, I represented tennis players that we've turned down millions of dollars to play exhibitions in Saudi Arabia. And it's just not what we want to do. It's not the people we want to do business with. That's our choice. I don't expect anybody to pat me on the back or anything. These are personal choices. The only thing I'm saying is these guys that make this choice to take the money, they can't get upset at the criticism because it's going to go with the territory. And that's the reality of this situation. And if their reputations get destroyed, or if the PGA Tour decides to, bar them from tournaments, that's the ramifications of your actions. You'll have to deal with it.
Yeah. I just don't.
I mean, it's
Listen,
not even really golf. You know what it is, Gary? It's weekend warrior stuff. It's 54 holes. It's shotgun. These guys would be better off playing with shorts, scotch in the bag, and cigars, and it would be entertaining. Okay.
Yeah.
But what they're doing now, they're trying to pass it off as a golf tournament, and it's not. It's weekend warrior stuff. And there is from a competitive standpoint, if you're a competitor, you say to yourself, man, you guys won't even compete to try to win, real championships again. You took the money and you took the pressure. It's weak. It goes against us in sports who thrive on competition. Like it would be like Michael Jordan in his heyday, taking $100 million to go play in the Russian professional league, and it just it just doesn't work. And these guys are going to learn a painful lesson, because a lot of these guys were relatively anonymous characters to non-sports junkies. I'm not talking about Mickelson, but even if you put Brooks Koepka's picture up, or Patrick,
I would know.
I mean, any of these, Charles Schwartz, you put some of these guys out, you can pick them out of a lineup. Now, all of a sudden, these guys are going to be the faces of people who are going to say, you guys are real un-American. I mean, and whether you agree with that or not, that's going to be the sentiment from a fairly large segment of the population.
Right. Joe Casale is my guest here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you, as I am every Tuesday at 2 p.m. And you brought up the Russian going over and playing in Russia. Brittany Grenier, ever going to be released? Eventually be released?
Yeah,
eventually trade?
She will be. And I know, from a diplomacy standpoint, the less said, the better. I know we live in an era of, we want constant information and constant updates and constant this. And I think if you're the United States, the last thing you want to do is, announce on Twitter what you're doing to try to get her out of there. But, it's going to be a very touchy negotiation, because here is Putin, who started a war that is not going the way he wants. And he's looking for leverage, and he's, thinks he's got leverage here. And it's very, very touchy, and I think eventually she's going to be released, but how and when and how that's going to be done, I mean, who knows? I mean, this is heavy stuff. And I read a lot that, not enough people are talking about this and all that. But in these kind of situations, I find the less that's said, the better, because all it does is inflame the situation. It doesn't make it better. One of the great lessons I had in negotiating is to learn from diplomats. There was a former diplomat to Kenya who moved to Miami, and was a cool guy. And he taught me a lot about negotiation. And he learned, I mean, because diplomacy is the ultimate negotiation, in the sense that this isn't, hey, we're all arguing whether you're going to get $5 million a year or $10 million a year. This is, can I get this person out of this jail before they cut he or she's head off? And what am I giving up in return? And how can I have these relationships with killers, to negotiate these kind of things? And I find the best negotiators in the world are diplomats, and they are low key, and they are on point, and they are quiet, and they are the exact opposite of what we see in sports and entertainment. And for something as serious as what Brittany Griner's going through, you need the pros, and you need the people like that.
Well, and also, Joe, they've got two of our soldiers now, two mercenaries. And the representative, the diplomat from Russia, said, we're treating them as such. They're combatants. We're not treating them with the Geneva Convention. which
Right.
the Russians never follow anyway, to be perfectly honest with you. For those of you out there that are thinking about that, they never follow that. I mean, the Vietnamese didn't when we were over there. I mean, so that's nothing new. But this just complicates the situation. Another one of our dear friends, Ed Berliner, wrote in a Facebook column also that your school, before she went over there, she was probably told time in and time out. And I know this. I was to Moscow. I'm sure, Joe, you have been to Moscow. I was there when I was in the Air Force and I was in uniform, KGB all over the place. I never had so many people watching me until I was probably 3 years old with my mother. You got to be careful when you go to these foreign countries. Even just going over to the Bahamas, you have to be careful about what you do, what you say, and what you bring into the country, what you want to take out of the country. And apparently somebody didn't advise her correctly. Otherwise, she'd probably be back into the United States, which is Ed's contention in his column. I'm sure you read it. He said they're schooled over and over again by agents, reps, etc. Do this, don't do that. And so, in a way, I kind of say she's got herself into the situation. We've now got to get her out of it. But I hope she's learned a lesson, and other athletes that go over there to earn money, because let's be honest, the WNBA doesn't pay anything like the NBA. It's like women's soccer. Eventually, someday that'll catch up like women's soccer. But in a way, she should have listened to her reps. In my opinion, Ed basically said the same thing.
Well, I think that that's kind of like the horse is out of the barn. Now you got to get her out of there. I think the bigger issue is trying to create women's sports leagues here so women don't have to go to Russia to earn money. It's not like these leagues are hurting, and it's not like they can't afford to do it. So if the lesson of this, instead of you got to be careful what you bring in and what you bring out of the country, if the lesson becomes, hey, let's really fund women's sports to where they can be professional athletes here and not have to chase money in places we don't want them to be, that would be a much more long-term solution to the situation than anything else. But it's a serious thing. And, my hope is that work behind the scenes is being done to get her out of there. I'm sure the United States is doing what they can, but it's when you're at the mercy of somebody else, it's a very precarious situation.
Yes, it is. It can be. I want to switch gears again, and I want to talk about your favorite subject and mine, baseball. Your Yankees are tearing it up. If they continue on this streak, they'll even beat the 27 Yankees wins and losses.
It's a crazy thing because to start the year, they didn't look like they were going to be a good team at all, and then it just started to click. And what happens in baseball today, you get on a roll, and there's so many teams that aren't trying to win. You start winning games and your confidence grows, and all of a sudden this team is so far, the sum of its parts are really better than any individual. Because if you look at what's going on, the only two guys on the team that you could argue are having career years are Aaron Judge and Jose Trevino, the catcher they got from Texas. Everyone else is either at or below their career norms. Gleyber Torres is hot lately and is starting to get back to being the player he was previously. But, Josh Donaldson, Aaron Hicks, Joey Gallo, DJ LeMahieu, all of those guys are hitting under their career norms, yet they're 50 and 17. It's crazy. Now, starting pitching's had an enormous amount to do with it. They're rolling out guys every day to help you win. But they're also doing something that probably isn't getting noticed as much. Look, analytics is all over baseball, and there's a lot that's good with it. There's a lot that isn't. It's here to stay, obviously, but they're not slaves to the data anymore. I mean, this whole and they're letting their starting pitchers pitch deeper into games, which before it used to be, well, the data shows when you have to face the hitters the third time around, the averages go up. Well, the Yankees aren't doing that this year. And a lot of teams in baseball aren't doing that, and they're having success because of it. And so, there's nothing wrong with analytics. The over-reliance on data is where baseball gets stuck in the mud. And I think what's happened for teams like the Yankees, they're doing certain things they didn't do the last few years. They're shifting less. So now their defense, which was among the worst in baseball the last 3 years, is number one. Why? Because they're shifting less, not more. And that kind of maybe be counterintuitive to some people. But what's happening is pitchers, and the thing I learned, which blew me away, is that pitchers don't pitch to a shift. Pitchers pitch to their strength. It's like if you've got three infielders on the right side of the infield, and Garrett Cole says, my best pitch is a fastball to the outer half, he's not pitching to the shift. And so if you're forcing him to pitch to the shift, then the guy who is the strength of your team, which is the pitcher, not the guy shifting, it's all counterintuitive, and it ends up hurting you. This year, the Yankees are shifting less. Their starting pitchers are pitching to their strengths, and what's happened is the team has taken off. Yeah. And then a thing called base running. And people who are into analytics say, stolen bases, it doesn't really work. You're wasting outs, blah, blah, blah. But the Yankees are not just stealing more bases. They're taking better leads. They're going from first to third on hits. They're advancing their opportunities to score because their base running has improved. So
they're playing. Running, yeah, Joe, they're doing what we did as kids. They're playing small ball. They're playing small ball.
But they still lead the league in home runs. But what's happened is the two things that people get bogged down who are heavily into analytics, base running and defense, the Yankees have adjusted. And because of those adjustments, they're a much better team. A lot of it is just, taking the guys you have and putting them in better positions to win. And isn't that the whole idea of coaching? You take what you have. It isn't it's the old Don Shula. It isn't the Don Shula and Bum Phillips day where Bum Phillips said of Don Shula, he can take his'n and beat urine, and he can take urine and beat his'n. I mean, in baseball, you got a 40-man roster. Yeah. You got to use all 40 guys at some point in the season to find ways to win games. How you utilize those guys is going to make the difference. And this year, the Yankees are utilizing those players better, and they're having better results.
Let me ask you something. First of all, I'm a Philadelphia Phillies fan, so I know you feel sorry for me right away. And I'm sure you'll be sending me a dinner in the near future to make up.
They're playing better since they fired Joe Girardi.
And I was so sad to see Joe Girardi. I used to call up my good friend Bobby Rydell, who who he is. The fans out there, he was a big pop star in the 50s and the 60s, and he was a dear friend of mine. And he'd often say, you got to get rid of this one, you got to get rid of that one. If you were running the Marlins and Jeter just left, and he said because the management and him weren't agreeing on anything, where would you start? I mean, I watch the Marlins as much as I can. I don't know where to begin to say, where are you guys going to start winning games on a consistent basis? Where would you begin, and what advice would you give the Marlins and their fans? Is there anything out there that impresses you about the Marlins?
Yeah, I mean, they have some young talent. You got to play young talent. You got to be willing to spend money to augment the roster. I mean, it gets down to the simple thing. You've got to be able to spend money to build a roster. And all these teams that cry poor mouth, they're all worth over $1 billion. They can afford to spend more money on payroll. It's all nonsense when they say they can't. And if an owner says, hey, I can't afford the payroll, then you should sell the team. But if if you have a team that's worth $1.5 billion, you could carry $125 million payroll. You can. And if you carry $125 to $130 million payroll, you have good baseball people in place who can have that balance of developing young players and augment them with the right veterans who fit with what you're trying to do, you can win. And the Marlins can do that. They choose to operate a certain way, and that comes from ownership on down. Jeter was putting them on the right track. They had a top 5 farm system. There are young players on that team that are good, but Jeter wanted to spend some money. Bruce Sherman didn't. And the guy who writes the checks is the guy that's going to make the decisions no matter how much he's paying you. And, they had a parting of the ways. But it gets down, being down here as long as I have and seeing the Marlins, there's just times management down here believes their own bullshit. They believe they're broke. They
Yeah.
believe they can't make money where they're all making money. I mean, look, Gary, I say this every time when I hear people talk about ownership in sports. These are crown jewels, okay? Everybody who's got money wants to own a sports team now. Hedge fund billionaires, from guys who, hit it in the web world. Everybody wants to own a team. If these
Yeah.
were money losers, they wouldn't have people lining up. The Walton family just spent $5.5 billion to buy the Denver Broncos. If it was a losing proposition, he wouldn't be writing a $5 billion check. Because that's not, I put down 10% and the bank's financing it. That is, I am writing a check with my name on it for $5.5 billion, because that's how the NFL rolls. And so in baseball, it's the same way. Every one of these franchises is worth over $1 billion. You can afford to run the team better. Now, they choose not to. That's their choice. They own the team, just as it's a fan's choice to say, you know what? It's not an entertaining product. I'm not putting my hard-earned money into it. And I'll tell you a funny story. I'm a baseball junkie, have been my whole life. It's the one, I don't smoke. I don't drink to excess. I don't gamble. I don't do drugs. But baseball is a drug for me. I can't give it up no matter how much they piss me off. I'm thumbing through the Fanatics Yankees page, and I don't want to be the 64-year-old guy in the bagel place with my fist in the air complaining. But I'm looking at the 4th of July at baseball hats for the Yankees, and they're $43. $43 for a baseball hat. I went into complete 64-year-old Italian guy fist in the air mode. Like, what the hell are we doing? $43 for a hat. Come on. And you start looking at those prices and you say to yourself, well, it's the Yankees. Okay, boom. Let's check the Marlins 4th of July hat. It's $43. Well, how are you going to build fan bases charging those kind of prices? People aren't going to buy them.
Yeah.
So it may not hurt the Yankees, but for teams like the Marlins, it hurts them, because you don't see kids walking around with Marlin merchandise. In South Florida, you see more of than anything Miami Heat attire.
Yeah.
There are people still wearing Dwayne Wade jerseys here. There are people that still wear Dan Marino jerseys here. Nobody's wearing Marlins jerseys. Nobody's wearing a Marlins hat. So make this stuff more affordable and get kids to the ballpark and get the stuff in the kids' hands.
Yeah.
Then you build a fan base instead of complaining about the fans not coming out. I can't spend money. I don't want to, beef up the payroll, blah, blah, blah. And then you know what the fans do today? Click, because there's too many options. There's too many other things they can do. And you lose them and you don't get them back. When we were growing up, baseball was our summer.
Yeah.
We lived for that. We were outside playing baseball. We were watching baseball. Now, there are too many other things for kids to do in the summer.
My very first baseball cap in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, was a Philadelphia Phillies cap. Been a Philly fan since 1963, and haven't changed, will not change. I know we cannot win no matter what happens, but whatever. Joe, we have just about run out of time, but I have one final thing for you.
Sure.
I'm not too sure I like this minor league thing where there's a clock on the pitcher that they think they're going to institute in the major leagues. What are they thinking?
Well, they are going to institute it, and what's happened is it has shaved down the games by over 20 minutes. And here's the dilemma baseball has. You can institute a pitch clock and shave 20 to 25 minutes off the game, or carry 2 less 30-second commercials per half inning and shave 18 minutes to 20 minutes off the game. And baseball is going to choose the pitch clock every time instead of losing the revenue. So that's kind of where it's at. And it actually, I was against it when I first saw it, and then I would go to games, and it isn't intrusive, and it actually does speed the game up.
Really?
And the problem is the people that are younger than us, especially kids, they don't want to sit through 2 hour and 50 minute, 3 hour and 10-minute baseball games. I'll tell you a quick funny story. I have tapes of old games. And the other day I watched the 1978 Game 3 of the Yankees Royals ALCS Championship Series. 9-inning game, Yankees won, hour and 47 minutes. There you go.
Yeah.
The other night, I was watching the Yankees play at home against Toronto, and they just finished the bottom of the third inning in an hour and 28 minutes. So there you go. I mean, there is where things have to change with baseball.
Yeah.
And they got to make the game shorter for today's fan.
Joe, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Main Street. It has been a pleasure to have you on. I wish the star of the house was there so he could bark into the microphone a little bit and raise up the neighbors.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. But before you go, I just want to thank you very much. But I also want to say something very special. This past week, I lost one of my dearest friends in the whole world, Miss Vicki Rossman. She was one of my agents and one of my managers when I first got started in doing stand-up comedy. She has left us, and she is in heaven. And I hope to God that the wings and angels carried her to her rest. And I just wanted to pay homage to her. She was a great and dear friend to me for so many, many years. And I just want to say thank you to her. And I just want to say to all of you out there, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on Main Street. Next week, Will Shriner joins us. Producer, director, actor, was on the Tonight Show over 50 times. You also know his brother, Ken Shriner, from General Hospital, but we're going to be talking comedy and show business, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun. And Joe, stay right there. But to all of you out there for taking a few minutes out of your day, join me next Tuesday at 2 p.m. for another Main Street. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.